Hi, this is David Yak, and in this video series, we're going to walk through a technical overview of building solutions with the Power Platform. To make it easier to consume, we've broken the video series down into 3 modules: overview, tailoring, and extending. You can consume these as it makes sense based on your role, although I recommend consuming them in that order. In the first module, overview, we're going to take a high-level look at the business problems that are trying to be solved by the Power Platform. We'll look at the individual components that make up the Power Platform so you understand how they can be used individually or together to gain the most benefit for your organization. In the second module, tailoring, we dive a little bit deeper into the customizations and configuration capabilities of the platform. So this is where we talk about actually building applications, automating things with Microsoft Flow, and really going deeper into some of the technical aspects of how you build applications on the Power Platform. In this module, we'll see some of the low-code aspects of the platform come to life and allowing anybody across the organization to build solutions. In the third module, extending, we're going to take a look at one of the unique characteristics of the Power Platform, its ability to unblock low-code solutions by going the step further into high code, where we use traditional developer tools, C#, Visual Studio, to extend the platform. In fact, you can also extend that into Azure, leveraging all the traditional cloud techniques that you would use building directly on the Azure Cloud Platform, getting the best of the overall full Microsoft stack. One of the key goals of the Power Platform is to enable digital transformation across the organization, and that means different things to different companies. But at the heart of it, obviously that involves some modernization of the workplace, leveraging AI. But really, to get the most advantage of it, you have to have some focus of how you want to go about doing this. And Microsoft really focuses on 4 key areas: empowering employees, engaging customers, optimizing operations, and transforming products. And you'll see a lot of what the Power Platform implements as new features, as well as the applications that Microsoft comes out with that builds on top of the Power Platform, really goes after enabling organizations to exceed in digital transformation across these 4 pillars. Now, it's easy to think of digital transformation as just being a buzzword that's thrown out by people in the industry, but to give a tangible way of thinking about it, if you look at how we used to build applications, they were very reactive. We'd have somebody sitting there waiting for a call to come in. They would then create a record in the system that would possibly have somebody go out, and they'd do some last-minute effort to try to resolve the problem that the customer was having. Now, what we have with the Power Platform, as well as some of the Azure cloud services, things like Azure IoT, that enable us to get more telemetry from the customer. We can do things like anomaly detection, which allows scheduling proactive maintenance. And therefore, we've actually turned on in how we go about solving customers' problems by trying to avoid them in the first part. Now, what's also shifted is the ease of ability to build solutions. We used to be in the reactive mode. It used to take years to build these solutions. And in fact, many of you have these systems sitting around that haven't been touched in 10 years, that you're just nursing along, hoping that you don't have to reinvest in it. With the Power Platform, you have the ability to build smaller applications. These applications can be built by people closer to the line of business or by more professional staff that is chartered with building those solutions. But it really allows them to get to market or get to use in the organization in a quicker pace. That allows companies to react quicker to what they're seeing as feedback from their customers or reaction to the marketplace of their products or services that they're offering. When it comes to implementing digital transformation with the Power Platform, there's really 3 key strategies that you can apply. And you don't have to choose just one of them. You can actually apply all 3 depending on your circumstances. The first is leveraging Dynamics 365 suite of applications. This includes sales, service, field service, as well as operations applications that are pre-built by Microsoft on the Power Platform. If the problem you're trying to solve in your organization doesn't fit one of the Dynamics 365 applications, you should look to AppSource. AppSource has listings for all the ISVs, independent software vendors, that build solutions on the Power Platform that you could start with. So these might be ones for specific verticals, or might solve certain challenges that you can implement for your organization. Now, if your problem doesn't fit either of those other 2 approaches, you can take the third approach, which is build a custom application, starting from either one of the first 2 approaches or by starting with a blank slate and an empty database and building up from there. And we'll be talking about how you can leverage all 3 of these approaches as we go through the rest of the module. Power Platform is made up of 3 key components: Power BI, Power Apps, and Microsoft Flow. Each of these provide a capability that you can use individually or use together. Power BI is focused on analytics, basically visualizing data in a meaningful way. That data can come from one or more sources and be presented for decision by a business user. Power Apps is all about the user interaction. So this is how you'll build applications that users interact with on the platform. This is what is used to build Dynamics 365 applications, as well as many of the apps that you'll find in AppSource. Microsoft Flow is all about automation of workflow in your organization. So this is packaging up in predictable, repeatable processes, automation that can work to save users a lot of time. It can also be used for integration across services using the data connectors that we'll be talking about. Opening, one of the things that's unique about the Power Platform is your ability to leverage traditional development techniques as well as Azure to unblock things that would be typically blocked in a low-code platform. And this allows you to take parts of the application where it makes sense, leverage things like Azure Cosmos Database or some of the cognitive services or other approaches that come with Azure Cloud Services, or simply require a developer to build more high-code solutions along with the low-code solutions that you build using Power BI, Power Apps, and Flow. Now, all of this can be orchestrated together to deal with your ongoing deployments, your continuous integration, continuous deployments by leveraging Azure DevOps as the tracking for managing your work items, your backlog, as well as managing the release pipelines to get things from development to test to production. To give you a little bit of idea around the scale and usage that the Power Platform is currently seeing, as well as some of the growth that it's experiencing currently. And just looking at the size of the data that's stored in the Power Platform, 1.5 petabytes of data, that's just a huge amount of data, as well as the monthly active users that are building things on the platform, over 2.5 million building things on the platform. And as we get a little bit further, I'll talk about how that comes from all across the organization, not just your traditional developers of applications. And also the momentum around new features and improvements that are coming that are a direct correlation to feedback that Microsoft is receiving from the community and users of the application platform, and addressing things that they need to be able to build the next generation of application. In the next release wave, there is over 400 features that are being added or improvements that are being added directly based on feedback. When you're looking at a platform to enable digital transformation in your organization, one of the important things to consider is the technical skills that you have across your organization. Now, this varies some from organization to organization, but predominantly you can look at the left-hand side, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, SharePoint, all being the traditional business applications that users use in an organization. And there are a lot of users that do that, as you can see by the trend of the graph of the brown highlighting that there are a lot of those users. On the right-hand side, you have JavaScript, HTML, CSS, C#, all the languages and technologies that you traditionally use to build applications. Now, when you think about an organization, most organizations have a very small amount of those that can do the traditional development, meaning that it's not spread across the whole organization, and that oftentimes where users have the best ideas come closer to the business user, and we'll talk about that in a minute. What the Power Platform does differently, because of how it approaches the low-code approach, things that are very similar to the skills that you would use to build Excel formulas, as well as to configure without having to do some of the high-code JavaScript, C# to be able to do that, allows Power Platform solutions to be developed across the set of the organization. And I'll talk more particularly about how the different audiences in the organization can participate in building the overall solutions as we get a little bit further. One of the key things the Power Platform does is empower across the organization its ability to innovate, not just a single group or the more technical developers, but it also starts at the business user, the power users that understand the business the best. They are able to bring their ideas to life, building a Power App or building a flow, something that makes their day-to-day life a little bit easier. Some of those applications or flows may grow up into help broader departments or in fact could impact the overall organization. And that's where it's important that they're built on a scalable platform. A lot of times when power users start building solutions, they aren't things that can be managed by a larger group when that user moves on or is no longer interested in maintaining it, or it's grown to the popularity that needs a little bit more governance around how it gets managed and rolled out. In the Power Platform, the IT staff or the professionals that are hired to either build applications for the company or to implement the governance and manage the application of the company, as opposed to the power users who traditionally have an actual function in accounting or customer service or some business function that they're performing. The IT staff are professionals that are hired or exist to basically implement corporate-wide applications. A lot of times this staff can collaborate with the power users to build more company-wide applications. This is the group that may pick up an application that was built by a power user when it got more popular that needs a little bit more rigor to its development. They may help aid in that ability to get that application out to the full company rather than just something that's used by one or two users, rounding off some of the edges. And finally, the developers. Developers are the traditional developers that use more high code techniques, things like C#, JavaScript, and they can unblock complex requirements. Now, this doesn't mean that developers or people that would traditionally do this role can't use some of the low code techniques. I come from a development background, and I think it's important to recognize that one of the things that's shifting in how we build applications for line of business use is that it's important to pick the technique that's appropriate for the type of application you're building and for the function you're implementing. So developers need to be able to use the high code techniques, extend into Azure, but they also need to be able to leverage some of the low code techniques where it's appropriate to solve the solution. Now, underlying all of this is the Power Platform governance capabilities. So this is the ability to implement different environments to support dev, test, production, to isolate power users into their own environment if they have a particular solution they're trying to build, as well as the governance to basically manage who can use what connectors, as well as the overall nurturing of users across the organization to be able to leverage the Power Platform to know how to build applications and really enable everybody across the organization to innovate on the Power Platform. Now that we've covered how the Power Platform fits into the vision and strategy in your organization and how it can be leveraged across to build solutions, let's talk a little bit more in depth and dive a little bit deeper into some of the individual components. We've mentioned that there's Power BI. Power BI is focused on the analyze. Power Apps is focused on the act. So in other words, taking action based on some of the data that's presented to you. And Flow is really all about automating. Now, these can be used independently, so you don't have to store your data in the Power Platform in the Common Data Service that we'll be talking about as the data storage engine. Data can come from SharePoint, can come from Dropbox, can come from any other third-party system that has connectors, or that you can build custom connectors to, as we'll be talking about in the modules as we dive a little bit deeper. Now, obviously, these are all best used together. When used together in combination with the connectors that are available for other systems, you can take Power BI to analyze, Power Apps to act, and Flow to automate, and use them together to have an overall complete solution that you implement. One of the things that sets the Power Platform apart from other approaches that you might have seen for building applications in a low-code environment is the ability to have connectors that connect to data and services. These are both Microsoft services as well as third-party. You can also create custom connectors, but these are what abstract the APIs or the application programming interface and make them simpler to consume by people building applications or building flows in the system, or to bring data into Power BI. Now, these can be data that is in services that are hosted in the cloud already, or using the data gateway. These can reach back to on-premises assets and bring those into the cloud solution that you're building with the Power Platform. Traditionally, when an organization builds a line of business application or somebody comes up with a problem they want to solve in an organization, you start with a blank whiteboard and you draw out a data model, starting from scratch, not leveraging any existing definitions to make it easier to be able to do. One of the things that Microsoft recognizes that leads to every solution having a different way that they approach a lot of the same common data. That's where the common data model comes in. The common data model is a set of unified definitions for some of the common business characteristics, things like sales entities, service, that really define the metadata associated with those, the fields, the attributes, the relationships of how they connect together, as well as the traits that those entities have. And that is packaged up as the common data model. Now, the common data model is not an implementation. It is just a schema specification that is open sourced on GitHub. It comes with over 260 standard entities out of the box. It was inspired from Microsoft's own applications, what they learned from implementing business applications, as well as working with independent ISVs or companies that are focused on verticals to bring some of the vertical aspects to the common data model as extensions. That common data model is implemented by some of the services. For example, both the common data service that we'll be talking about and Power BI implement the common data model as a way to describe the data that they store in a common way. You can actually use the common data model also for the definitions in your own internal systems, even if they're not implemented in the common data service or Power BI for storage. You could take it, for example, a SQL database and implement some of the similar definitions and be compliant with the common data model, making it easier for you to interoperate and integrate with other systems by using some of the common definitions. It's also important to call out that using the common data model doesn't preclude you from adding your own custom aspects to the data entities that are stored in there, to add your own fields, your own relationships, and really tailor it for your own solution. The common data model just provides a structural, common, unified set of definitions to start with that you can then evolve to implement your own unique solution. The Power Platform allows you to store data wherever you would like to store it, and you can access it through connectors to bring it into Power BI, to Power Apps, or to Microsoft Flow. However, the Power Platform also has a first-class data service called the Common Data Service, or oftentimes referred to as CDS. Modern line of business applications have different types of data they store. Things that are relational, that need a traditional relational characteristics, things that are more document-oriented, that need more of a document database, as well as some that are just simply more file-oriented. And Common Data Service is a hybrid database that abstracts a lot of those underlying details so you don't have to worry about what storage engine is best for the particular type of data. You worry about just modeling the data of the real-world entities that you want to create. In this example, I've got permit. Somebody's making a change to a property. They want to get approval for their plans. And there's relationships to the inspections that are done for the work that was done based on those plans that they submitted, as well as who owns the building, and the notes that the inspector put as they did the inspection on that particular permit. Now, all of these can be done custom, where I implement the entity, but also the CDS database implements the common data model that we just talked about, allowing you to bring in some of the common sales, service, or ISV applications into it. In addition, CDS also implements role-based security down to the field level. This means that you don't have to implement your own security model. You can take advantage of the robust security model and the patterns that the Common Data Service provides. You also have the ability to do logic and validation at the data level that's enforced across anything that's consuming the application. So whether a user is building the application, they're pulling data into Excel that's connected to CDS, all of those enforce that data level rules that you put in place that match the business domain rules that you have for your application. And we'll dive deeper into building solutions with the Common Data Service as we get into the tailoring module, where we explain how some of this comes to life and some of the other benefits you get when you create an entity, including things like an API, as well as other eventing infrastructure that oftentimes solutions have to build custom using developer resources just to do some of the common plumbing that you need to build an application on the platform. Because the Power Platform can be used by users across the organization to build solutions, it's important to have built-in governance and administrative capabilities to be able to manage those types of environments. This includes the ability to configure Azure Active Directory options, including multi-factor authentication for use with the Power Platform applications, as well as getting audit log and other usage analytics, and also putting in place data loss prevention policies that can help put guide rails on for users that are building solutions to make sure they don't use connectors together that might result in data leakage out of the organization. In addition to administrating the applications using the portal, administrators can also take advantage of PowerShell or the connectors that can perform administrative action, allowing you to build your own Power Apps or Microsoft Flows that administrate the platform and implement your own custom governance that fits your own needs as an organization. Well, of course, I think that Microsoft is a leader in the low-code development platforms. That's why I'm recording this video. I wanted to highlight that also Forrester, one of the industry analysts, also has recognized Microsoft as a leader in this space as well. And you can kind of see the different players and where Microsoft ferrets out. And I think what really influences this is Microsoft's ability to really bring together a complete set of tools, as well as to unlock for building more sophisticated things that unlock even beyond that into the Azure capabilities, and to have that full stack of a platform that people can bring to bear for solving their problems at their organization. A little bit and talk a little bit more about building applications on the platform, whether you're building an Office 365 customization on SharePoint all the way to an ISV application. You're building your applications using the Power Apps technologies. It's a suite of designers and studios that allow you to basically build the application, leveraging the connectors to talk to the data or services that your application has. Currently, as I mentioned, there's over 250 connectors, but you can also add your own to this, making it so that your application can talk to virtually anything that you can put an API in front of and describe as a connector into the platform. When you build a Power App, you're building a standalone application that can be used in the web or the mobile application players that are available for Power Apps. This gives users access to the applications wherever they might be. When you start building an application, you can start with either a blank canvas, which gives you complete control over the user experience and what's on the screen that the user interacts with, or you can build from a model-driven approach, which starts from the data and builds a form over data application, quickly enabling you to get something working with the data that you've defined in the Common Data Service. In addition to having access to the data sources to interact with data and services from external items, you also have the ability to leverage device capabilities such as the camera, the GPS, push notifications. You also have the ability to use custom components. Custom components allow you to have pre-built pieces that you embed in your application without you having to build them from scratch. And we'll see more examples of these as we get into the tailoring and the developer modules of this video series. Power Apps also allows you to easily add artificial intelligence to your application without becoming a data scientist. By leveraging AI Builder, which is built into the Power Apps portal, you're able to train models and then leverage those models inside the Canvas application to do things like object detection without even leaving the application. The Power Apps that you build can be embedded in other applications, allowing you to reach the user where they're already spending the time, not make them come to your standalone application. Whether they're in Outlook, whether they're using a SharePoint form, whether they're in Power BI, Teams, this meets the user where they want to interact with the application, giving you the full ability to build an application that leverages the connectors and other capabilities of Power Apps without leaving the app that they're embedded in. Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about Microsoft Flow. Microsoft Flow is at the heart of the automation that you can do with the Power Platform. This lets you trigger events either running off a manual trigger. Somebody says, hey, I want to run this now by clicking a button in the mobile application, or it can be triggered based on a business event that happens from somewhere else within the Common Data Service, or even an external service. There's over 400 triggers that come out of the box that allow you to start flows and have them run. Plus, you can define custom events from external systems using custom connectors. Once your flow has been triggered or started, you can use any of the other connectors to interact with other systems or services as it progresses through the flow. Think of it as starting at the top, progressing to the bottom. Using those, you can do things like create a document in SharePoint, create a record in SAP, you can create a record in Common Data Service. You could send a tweet on Twitter using the Twitter connector. It really just depends on how you want to orchestrate things across the different systems. One of my favorite capabilities of Flow is the approval capabilities. How many times have you needed to get approval for something from one or more people, having to custom build that approval flow? Now you can use the approval built in where you simply state who you need to get the approval from, what they're approving, the actions that they want to take, and the system takes care of making that prompt the user, email the user, allow them to approve it through email. And basically that integrates into your flow. So as your flow gets to that approval stage, it stops, waits for the approval to happen or not happen, and then continues on either the yes path or the no path, depending on whether the approval is achieved. Just like we talked about with building a Power App, you can bring artificial intelligence into your flow as well, automating that interaction with the AI models that you build, either through directly using some of the Azure Cognitive Services or using AI Builder like we talked about for things like object detection or form processing that you can do by building the model in the Power Apps portal and then leveraging the model that was built as part of your Flow orchestration. Let's talk about some of the common scenarios where you might see Microsoft Flow being useful. We already talked about the automated approvals, being able to do that across data stores and services. Reoccurring processes, things that you need to happen once a week, once a month, being able to have them trigger on a specific schedule. Even human interaction things, process guidance, using the business process flow capabilities, you're able to provide stages that you break a business process into these major stages and then have steps that they must complete to move to the next stage. being able to stage gate them, so not allow them to move to the next stage without completing the necessary steps in the prior stage. Automated triggers allow you to have logic that runs, things that are orchestrated after an event happens, things like a record created or a file is created in Dropbox or in OneDrive. Mobile users are able to also get into the effect kicking off one of the Microsoft flows from the mobile application, giving it context for where the user is located or other important information, even including custom parameters that they want to pass to give the flow information on what processing it needs to do in the background. Power Apps users can also kick off and launch a flow in the background. This allows you to use flow to offload work that otherwise a user might have to wait for the application complete, allow that flow to run in the background. In the tailoring module, we'll dive in deeper into what a flow looks like, and in fact, I'll go ahead and build one. But to give you an idea, essentially all flows have a trigger, something that starts the flow, and then they have one or more actions to define what the flow is going to do. Use the visual designer to be able to do this. So you can use drag and drop, copy, paste to kind of orchestrate and move things around within the designer. And we'll see all that come together in the tailoring module. The final component of the Power Platform I want to cover is Power BI. This is really all about analytics, taking the data that you have, bringing it together, and being able to produce real-time dashboards or interactive reports that you can analyze and then decide what actions you need to take to go from there. You can do queries against that data. Now, the data that you bring into Power BI can come from a variety of different sources. It can be cloud data, it can be on-premise data, it can be telemetry, it can be real-time data coming off a device. It can also be more transactional data from a sale or a transaction that the customer just completed. You can consume this from the web, from mobile, and even embedded in a Canvas app, you can interact and have your analytics right there side by side, or the Canvas app can be embedded in the Power BI. So you're starting to see how all of these components can kind of be used and interact with together. In fact, you can even have a flow that pushes data into Power BI to give some of that real-time characteristics that you might want to see in your data. The end goal when you work with Power BI is to produce a nice, pretty dashboard like this that brings together data from a variety of sources. And we've already talked a little bit about how that can do that. And I'm going to talk a little bit more as we continue on through this module about bringing in data and some of the capabilities. That data can be live connected, or it can be a scheduled refresh where it refreshes at a periodic time. This allows you to decide whether you want something to be a live report or something that is, as of last night or as of the last data refresh that you have on there. Data can come from a variety of data sources. In fact, we'll look at how data flows add a way to take and combine those data sources and bring them in so they can be reused across multiple Power BI reports and dashboards. Normally, when you build a Power BI report or a dashboard, you define the data sets that it brings into that. And if you were to define multiple Power BI assets, each one you would start by defining their own data sets, and they would do their own preparation of that data. Where data flows come in is allow you to have predefined data source that you're going to pull into as your data set. This data flows come from external sources just like data sets, but they allow you to do some pre-processing on them. So rather than having to do that work on each Power BI report or dashboard you're going to build, you can do that once in the data flow and then bring the data flow in as your data set. And then your report and dashboard is based off that data flow, and you're not having to redo some of the prep work over and over again. One of the things that's nice when you're working with the data flows have the ability to work with mapping the data into the common data model compliant folders. So if a data source, for example, came from another CRM system that wasn't Common Data Service or wasn't in CDM already, you could map that into, for example, a CDM account or a contact. And then from the reports you build, it would look at it just like it came from Dynamics 365 Sales and Service because it was mapped into that common data model format. When you leverage data flows, the data is pulled in and mapped into Azure Data Lake storage, and it's stored in common data model format. And that allows it to not only be accessible by Power BI, but it also opens it up for being able to be used by other Azure services and other custom applications you might build. So you might use this to ingest data in to do some Azure machine learning, and then you might take the results of some of that processing and inject it back into the Common Data Service for action within the Power App or flow for further processing of the data or insights that you gain from that machine learning processing that was completed. Oftentimes, when you first adopt the Power Platform, you may have data that's in external systems that you want to bring into the Common Data Service. You can use the data integration capabilities of the platform to be able to bring that data in or synchronize that data on an ongoing basis. The data integration capabilities leverage Power Query to be able to do some of the mapping and transform of those data sources. You have a number of data sources, everything from SQL to Azure Tables to Salesforce, IBM databases that you can bring data in, transform it, and bring that in. There's templates for some of the common sources that you can use, things like Salesforce, to be able to bring data into the platform. Once the data is integrated into Common Data Service, you can use all the tools that are available to the Common Data Service on that data. In the extending module of the video series, we dive deeper into the high-code developer support that the platform has available to it, but they really boil down to client extensions, things that the developer can do to extend the user experience, as well as server extensions, things that you can do to really implement custom code that runs as part of the eventing mechanisms of the platform. For example, when a record is created, you can automatically run some custom code to perform some additional business logic. And that business logic becomes a natural extension of the platform, just like it was almost built as part of the platform itself, providing a deep integration for that custom code into the platform. You can also leverage integration. This is through publishing events outside through Azure Service Bus or to webhooks outside the platform. Developers also have a complete REST API that they can work with to do pretty much automate anything that they want through the API that you could do through the portals with either data or customization characteristics of the platform. And we'll dive a lot deeper into this in the third module on extending, where we cover the developer support in more detail. From an application lifecycle management perspective, it's important to think about the overall life of the application, from building it to basically getting it deployed and managing it on an ongoing basis. This starts with when you're building a solution and the capabilities that come around the solution framework. The solution framework is the container that all your customizations, everything you customize to build a solution, are stored in. That solution is used to move from dev to test to production as part of the lifecycle of the application. All of this can be automated and tracked using Azure DevOps or your other favorite tools that's similar to that, using some of the tasks that are available or APIs that are available to automate the platform on there. In the tailoring module, we'll dive deeper into how some of the solutions work to track the customizations that you're working and how that works throughout the life cycle of the application as it's deployed from dev to test to production. From an update upgrade perspective, you can think about updates as happening on an ongoing weekly basis using a safe deployment practice where they deploy to one of the stations. There's multiple stations and those roll out. So you may find, depending on where you're located in the world, that you may get things a little bit earlier than the other parts of the world. That's all part of how the weekly updates roll out across the geographic areas. Twice a year, starting in April and October, there are major release waves. These are the more disruptive things that might have a change in the user, interaction, whereas the weekly updates are intended to be either fixes or things that do not impact how the user visually interacts with the system that's on there. As part of the April and October releases, you'll find that several months before there are published release notes that highlight the changes. These detail out what is planned and when they'll be landing from that April to October timeframe or October to April. So think of them as a wave of the features that roll out during that time. And all of them bring things that have been requested by users or enhancements that bring great value to the platform. It's important to understand that the Power Platform follows the trusted cloud principles that Microsoft has adopted, really focusing on security, privacy control, compliance, and transparency. And all of this is at the forefront of all the decisions they make on enhancements as well as management of the platform. This is detailed out on the Microsoft Trust Center. If you want to drill in, you want to find out the certifications or the attestations that the platform has, or understand how privacy is handled on the various components of the system, you can find that on the Microsoft Trust Center. Well, that gets us to the end of our overview, but I wanted to leave you with a couple of actions to take as you continue on. First is some learning resources. So if you want to dive in deeper, Microsoft Docs has all the product documentation on it. Microsoft Learn has learning paths that are appropriate for learning more about Power Apps and Flow as well as Power BI. if you continue on with us in the video series, in the second module, tailoring, we'll look at a little bit more in-depth look at building applications and building flows on the platform. And then in the final third module, we'll look at some of the developer techniques that can be used to further extend the platform as well. Thanks for joining us in the overview. Look forward to seeing you in the next module.